Professor Pallas here. In our lecture today, we'll learn about the trace mineral iron. Remember that trace minerals are minerals that we do require daily, but we require them in smaller amounts than the major minerals. Iron is one of the trace minerals. Iron serves many different functions in the body. It contributes to metabolism. It's a major component of hemoglobin and myoglobin. Iron carries oxygen in the body to all of the cells in the body, and it also helps carry carbon dioxide, CO2, out of the body. Iron also contributes to a healthy immune system. Adult men and women have different needs for iron. Men need less iron than women. On a daily basis, men need 8 milligrams of iron. Women need 18 milligrams of iron. Food sources for iron exist in both plant and animal form. So we find iron in meat, fish, poultry, in enhanced foods, and also in fortified foods and cereals. You can have both toxicity and deficiency of iron. If you have taken in too much iron, the indicators would be nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, and possibly kidney and liver damage, as well as other organ damage. If you are deficient in iron, one of the first signs is fatigue. You may see shortness of breath. You may be diagnosed with microcytic anemia. You could have a poorly functioning immune system. And in infants, we see that they are growing more slowly than would be expected. With adults, one of the first indicators that someone may have an iron deficiency would be fatigue, shortness of breath. Those are related to the inability to carry as much oxygen as is needed to all of the cells of the body. Iron does interact positively and negatively with other nutrients. Notably, iron interacts with vitamin C, with zinc, and with calcium. So bioavailability, remember that term. Bioavailability is the amount of the nutrient that we can actually absorb and use within the body. And the bioavailability of iron varies based on multiple factors. The first thing that affects iron's bioavailability is the source. Are we talking about plant-based iron or animal-based iron? Animal-based iron, food from animal sources, is called heme iron, and heme iron is the most easily absorbed and used by the body. Plant-based iron, iron from plant sources, is called non-heme iron, and this is a little more challenging for the body to absorb. We can absorb it, but not as easily. There are some nutrients that enhance iron absorption. The first of these is vitamin C. If you have vitamin C present in your small intestine at the same time as iron is present in the small intestine, your body's ability to absorb that iron will be improved. There's also something called MPF factor, meat, poultry, fish. And MPF factor will increase your body's ability to absorb iron. An additional item, interestingly, that will increase your body's ability to absorb iron is a deficiency in iron. Your body will very tightly control the amount of iron that is in your blood at all times. If the body detects that the blood iron levels are lower than optimal, the body will call for more iron to be absorbed. The liver actually controls this. So there are also items that decrease your body's ability to absorb iron. The first would be phytates in cereals and grains. They bind iron and make it more difficult for us to absorb it. Oxalates also bind iron, typically in plant foods, and make it more difficult for us to absorb iron. Reduced hydrochloric acid in the stomach makes it more difficult for us to absorb iron. That's something that happens to some people naturally as they age. Their body has lower ability to make HCl in the stomach. The excessive use of antacids, which is affecting the pH level in the stomach, that can affect your ability to enhance iron, to absorb iron. And additionally, excess intake of some minerals, and those would be calcium, zinc, and magnesium. If you have excess intakes of those, they can affect your body's ability to absorb iron. This is why it's important for you to not over supplement with manufactured supplements. Always aim to get your nutrients from food first. And if you think you have a deficiency, take a food diary and do the math first. Don't just add a supplement in over the top. So let's take a closer look at this graphic here, which shows us how iron is used in the body, how it's absorbed, and the difference between the absorption of non-heme versus heme iron. So I'm going to zoom in here so we can take a closer look at this image. So non-heme iron, we see a little pile of green spinach up here, and for that to get into the small intestine, so we have three different areas here. The first rectangle on the slide at the top, outlined in orange, is representing the stomach. The second larger is representing the small intestine, and the third is representing the colon. Within the small intestine, we see the enterocyte, which is pale colored cell, and we see the portal vein, which is to the right and darker. So let's start at the top with non-heme iron. We have a little pile of spinach here. We eat this, it gets into the stomach. Before it can cross over into the small intestine, stomach acids must play a role and help break that down. When the non-heme iron gets into the small intestine, it is in the form of Fe positive 3, okay? So this will try to cross over the brush border into the enterocyte, but it can't do it by its own. A transport protein has to get involved and help carry Fe3 into the enterocyte. So we see that small purple protein there that helps transport that into the enterocyte. The Fe3 is then stored. It's held in a form called ferritin, and it will be stored there until the body decides it needs more iron in the blood. That Fe3 can then be oxidized and transported into the portal vein. Some of the Fe3, you'll notice, doesn't even get into the enterocyte. Some of it, even though the transport proteins are there, some of it goes right down to the colon, and it's bound to undigestible substances such as fiber, and it's excreted in the feces. So plant iron is not all absorbed. Some of it is going to make it into the small intestine with the help of a transport protein, but some of it is going to be excreted out as part of the feces. The iron that you absorb from meat is different. This is the heme iron, and the heme iron goes right from your stomach into the small intestine and crosses right over into the enterocyte. Okay, it does not require a transport protein. You see that? It's not connecting to that little purple transport protein. It's being absorbed directly into the small intestinal cell, the enterocyte. That Fe+2 can go right into the portal vein. Okay, it'll connect right onto the transport mechanism, which is ferroportin, and go right into the portal vein. So this is the difference, and this is why we say that heme iron is more easily absorbed and used by the body than non-heme iron, which is the heme iron from plant sources. Your body can use both of them, but it does use the heme iron from plants more efficiently. So this diagram is on page 474 in your textbook, and there is a lot of information there if you're interested in learning more about the different forms of iron in the body, because the body has storage forms of iron and active usable forms of iron in the body, which are adjusted based on what the body needs, and this is all controlled by the liver. Okay, this is just an introduction to nutrition class, so you do not need to memorize all of this information yet, but I want you to begin to process and understand that the heme iron from animal sources can transport directly into the small intestine, be absorbed, be used, and shipped right into the portal vein for use. The non-heme iron from plant sources is different. Some of it is going to get passed straight to the colon and excreted as waste. Some of it will get attached to a transport protein and carried into the enterocyte. It's then held in a storage form unless we have a need for iron. If we have a need for iron, it can be broken down and then attached to the transport ferroportin and carried into the portal blood for use. So this is something to be aware of. If you are a vegetarian or a vegan, or if you're counseling vegans and they have low iron levels, this is something that you're going to want to consider. Take a look at where their iron is coming from. It's going to be all non-heme if they're vegan. So this is something you may have to work at. You may have to increase the amount of non-heme iron that they're taking in because you recognize that less of it is being absorbed. Thank you so much for your time today.